Welcome to today's episode with Asha Nayaswami. Before we start, I would like to thank our generous sponsors for today. Our first sponsor is ANICON. ANICON is a leading sustainable project and construction management company in Greece. Learn more about ANICON at aniconprojects.com. Our second sponsor for today is ForcaDivina Foundation that aims to raise human awakening and help increase consciousness. Learn more about ForcaDivina at forcadivina.org. And now, my discussion with Asha Nayaswami.
Hi.
Asha Nayaswami, welcome.
Thank you. You can just call me Asha. I don't need to be titled. I prefer not to.
Asha, Asha, welcome. I've been dreaming of this moment for a couple of years. It's an honor. I'm deeply grateful today to co-create this sacred space of healing, love, and peace. Let's spread the seeds of love and light all over the world, shall we?
Shall we? I think that sounds like a lovely idea. I'm sorry you waited a couple of years. We could have done this before.
The time is perfect now. It's a divine timing. So let's co-create. So let's start. I see a difficulty people understanding that we are more than our physical bodies. What
Right.
would you tell them?
Well, I would ask people to pay attention to their own experience.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have all kinds of experiences that transcend physical limitations. You have you dream about experiences that turn out to be true. You have a sense of how people are feeling and you contacted them and it turns out to be right. You go into a place and it feels familiar to you. What about love at first sight? When you've just met someone and you've never seen them before, but all of a sudden you feel so attuned to them. Or even just being out in nature and suddenly the limitations of who you are just go beyond the borders of your body. Real knowledge has to be based not on what somebody tells you, but on what you actually feel and experience in yourself. So I would say pay attention would be the simple thing I would say.
Pay attention to the simple things, which are the magical things as well. Eh?
Well, you know, great knowledge is built inch by inch. We tend to think that we know something all at once, but we really change just a little at a time. You just, oh, I understand now. I mean, just that's how often do you say that? And then from that point on, you know, where you didn't before. It's magical in that sense, yes.
It is, yes. And what about the hidden blessings within the various situations in life? How we can find these in this simplicity and this awareness that you propose? How can we find the hidden blessings in our life?
Well, you know, I'm going to have to say it again. You have to pay attention, but
Again.
you have to also realize that often it takes time for things to reveal themselves.
Mm.
It and suffering is real. So, I mean, it's real in the sense that we experience it deeply. So when we're in the throes of something that's very challenging and we're having a difficult time just, you know, keeping our head above water, it's very hard in that moment to see the blessing. So sometimes it's unless it comes to you spontaneously, sometimes knowledge will just come to you spontaneously and you'll understand why something is happening. But much of the time when it's challenging, you don't understand why. So the feeling of blessing has to come from having paid attention enough to things that have happened to you in the past and the cycle has run. Oh yes, I remember when this awful thing happened, but if that hadn't happened, then all of these next steps which led to a place I really want to be would never have happened. So therefore, even when you're in the middle of the next challenge, you can remember that sometimes these things work out differently than we expect. That's certainly how I've seen it in my life. I don't bother, except in the dimmest theoretical way, to tell myself, oh, this is good, what's happening, because it isn't, it's awful. you know. But I can also say that sometimes things work out differently than you expect. And I can say that's true. And that lightens the load in the moment. You know, and then there's just the simple and obvious thing, which is everything in life is dual. It's the nature of this planet. And so there are always a great many dark things to focus on, difficult things, challenging things, negative qualities in ourselves, but there's also positive. It's simply like, which side am I going to look at? You know, there's a very simple image that I've found very helpful, which is if something really difficult is happening, and let's say your whole palm is painted black, and you put that right up against your eyes like this, even if your eyes are wide open, everything looks black. But if you just put that hand out in front of you like that, and it's just as black, but you can also see another reality around it. And I find that's the best way for myself. And especially when I'm helping others, it's not as if what's happening is good. It's just that when you begin to see it in proportion and in relation to the rest of your life, sometimes then it looks different.
Yes, because usually we in this material reality, we enjoy to put titles on our experiences and our suffering. This is bad, this is negative. No, it's not. It's a teaching. But you mentioned the word suffering. Why we suffer?
Well, if you're honest, you'll notice that you don't learn unless something really pushes you. Most of the time that we have a strong subconscious. By that I mean, I don't mean subconscious in the context I use it in self-realization, means everything that you already know. So just all the accumulated that who you are. And then there is the superconscious, which is the opposite side of that. Superconscious is always enticing us to expand and become bigger. Subconscious is always telling us, you'll be more comfortable if you just stay the way you are. Don't think about expanding your awareness, just shrink it a little bit and then you'll feel comfortable. I mean, if you have a challenge and you go to sleep, you have a challenge, you have a glass of wine, you turn on the television, you just do something that distracts you and lowers your energy instead of going forward and trying to face into it and become bigger. Now, you do reach the certain point in your desire for expansion where you recognize that expansion will give me much more joy. And so even then, when tremendous challenges come, even though they may take all the energy you have, you don't suffer in the same way because you know that this is taking me somewhere. And so we suffer because we want things to be different than they are. And it's important to understand that suffering for ourselves is bad, but suffering for the people we love is often worse. And so some of our desire for suffering not to happen is because our heart wants others to be happy. But we also have to understand that if they don't have these challenges, they'll never grow. So would you really like people never to grow? Do you want them to, I mean, would you like your 4-year-old child to always be 4 years old in their emotions and their mind? No, you want them to grow up. And so we're like 4 years old, even though we have adult bodies. But because we're pushed by things that we would rather not have to face, we're forced to get bigger. And if you pay attention to yourself, you realize much of the best things that happened to you would not have happened if you hadn't been pushed as hard and suffered, because then you were forced to make new discoveries. I wish that God had a different arrangement, but he's never asked me. So I have an opinion, but I don't have a vote. That's just the way it is.
how can we align with our soul's purpose, which is actually related to what you were talking before, you know, the university of the universe, this earth school we are all in, to understand delusion and enlightenment?
Right. Well, first of all, you have to care. I mean, the vast majority of the people in the world are not even thinking about it. So you have to ask yourself again on a very deep level, like what will the question is always, what will bring me true happiness, and what will take that happiness away from me? And again, we have to be very, very honest, because the world around us basically gives us exactly opposite answers. In the Bhagavad Gita, it says, what is day to the worldly man is night to the yogi. What is night to the yogi is day to the worldly man. And by that, it means it's not really talking about lifestyle. It's just talking about whether you're thinking about inner realities or outer realities. Is my life defined according to what it looks like outwardly, or is my life defined according to the consciousness and the values and my capacity to live up to those values that I'm carrying inside? And the only way to do it is really on a minute by minute basis. On what basis am I making my decisions? And every little decision that you make, like, what are the principles that are guiding this decision? Is it to make myself secure, to make myself look good, to commit myself to superficial values like youth and fame, or things that'll just depend entirely on things out of your control? Or am I making my decisions on the basis of what I know to be right? Do I have the courage to do that? Will I choose an expanded view of life or a small view of life? And you have to be practical about yourself. I mean, the phrase that I often use is quite simply, I'm not that good. I aspire to be that good, but I'm not that good. And sometimes I have to just make a smaller decision because I'm not that good. But I'm consciously knowing what my values are, seeing how close I can come to them, and then choosing what's realistic. But at least I'm doing it consciously, instead of just letting old habits and old fears grab a hold of me all the time.
This reminded me of Suzuki's book, Beginner's Mind, that what you just mentioned. And talking about values and principles and our truth, this means that we should, ought, need to be aligned and authentic with ourselves. Do you believe that it's important to be authentic
Oh,
and true to
absolutely.
yourselves?
One of the grave mistakes people make is that from the spiritual perspective, is that they try to assume a spiritual attitude, which is you look around and you see how people who seem to be embracing spiritual values behave, and then you try to behave accordingly. And that's not really going to help you. What you have to do is you have to ask yourself very honestly and courageously, who am I? What do I really believe? What really makes me happy? What makes me feel happy? And you can't just say, oh, no, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Well, if it does, it does. And then you find the place where you actually stand, and then you try to make it a little better. I mean, if you love to drink wine and you're drinking 7 glasses of wine every night, try to take 6, try to take 5. You can't just sort of say, well, spiritual people do this, this is what I'll do. If you have a tendency to be angry, try to count to 10 before you become angry. Just say, look, this is what I'm working with. Because if you just suppress it or pretend, as soon as any kind of pressure comes on you, you'll just revert. But if you've actually increased your level of awareness by 2 inches, then you'll be able to stand even when the pressure comes, because this will be solid. And you don't fool anyone. I mean, the divine is within us. And just because we pretend to be spiritual, God knows our thoughts. So the other thing is it just doesn't work. It's like I went through a cycle with my own teacher, Swami Kriyananda, very early. He gave me a job that was very difficult for me to do. And at that time, I didn't know how to learn. So he kept trying to help me. But I thought competency was like the fairy godmother touches you with a wand and then you suddenly are something else. So I thought you just are competent. I didn't realize that you can learn to be competent. So for 2 years, he kept trying to help me, and I kept pretending everything was fine, but everything was not fine. It was a mess. And after 2 years, he finally said, how did he put it? He said, you kept wanting to like show that you were a loyal devotee, and therefore you would say, yes, sir, yes, sir. He said, but you never fooled me, was the phrase he used. And I started laughing. I said, well, what a colossal waste of energy. Just 2 years trying to pretend I was something that I wasn't, and nobody was fooled. And that's what you have to realize. Nobody's fooled. Your friends are not fooled. God is not fooled. You're not even fooling yourself. Just a waste of time. Just be exactly who you are, and then try to become a little better from there.
And how can we handle fear?
Fear. Fear is the big opposite of everything that's good. In the Bible, St. John says, perfect love casts out all fear. So the opposite of fear, interestingly, is love. And the only perfect love there is the love of God. This is interesting. I've been thinking about this one a lot. The only thing that I know of that actually eliminates fear is experience that we are not alone and that we are being protected, that God is protecting us, and that no matter how difficult something may seem, if you just do your best and persevere, in the end, it will prove to be of benefit to you. That does not mean that it will end well. That does not mean that you will get what you want. That does not mean that you won't even die. Of course, you will die at a certain point. These things happen. But if we understand that we are, the best image of it is, I used to read a lot of mountaineering books. I mean, I've never been on a mountain in my life. But I liked stories of courage. I like true stories of courage. And you read these mountaineering books and, oh my gosh, these people just go through horrendous things, intense suffering and fear and all these things, just for no reason except to get to the top of the mountain. But sometimes, in order to go up, you actually have to go down. You go down through a valley and down through a crevasse. You do all these difficult things. And so we have to begin to understand that's what we're going somewhere. You see, you can't get out of fear unless you know that life has a purpose. If life has no purpose, then everything that's terrible that happens is simply terrible, and it's frightening, and sometimes it's awful, and that's the end of it. And this is how people get old, actually. What actually makes people old is that they just shrink, their possibilities shrink. When children are young, teenagers and in their 20s, you have all this expectation that all your dreams will be fulfilled, whether you work for them or not, whether they're appropriate or not. You just imagine that it'll all be fulfilled. You get to be 40 and you realize what a tremendous amount of work is involved in success. And you may have been imagining you had talents that you didn't really have. And if you don't understand that this incarnation is just one of many, that we are on this long journey from delusion to enlightenment, that it's not what we accomplish, it's who we become, then you have no antidote to fear, quite honestly, because physical life is a fearsome reality. But if you understand yourself as an eternal spirit going through this experience, then even though fear is very natural, you have another dimension behind it, you might say. So we walk through this fear, but we're not alone because we have this understanding in our mind that I will learn something that will be important for me by going through this. So you have to have a quest for conscious experience beyond the moment. And then you have to remember that experience at the time of crisis. And the main actual thing is you have to practice all the time. I asked Swami once basically this very complicated question. And the question really turned out to be, how do you know in a moment of crisis what God wants you to do? And he said, you have to practice when it's easier. You have to always be asking of the choices that are in front of me. You don't want to make yourself crazy. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you have the egg salad or the peanut butter sandwich, you know, you can't make everything a big divine question. But in the major questions of your life, you ask, you know, how can I elevate my consciousness? How can I serve others? And when that becomes a habit, then even as the stakes are raised, you have the habit of seeing your life in terms of a trajectory. Otherwise, yeah. So, but you see, it's those terrifying experiences that gradually drive people to seek a higher purpose, because the suffering is too intense. It becomes unbearable. So you have to find an answer. You're compelled to find an answer.
Beautiful. Thank you, Ash. This is a quote of yours, actually. When you meditate regularly, you'll discover that place in your heart when you can rest in the experience of God's love. Why should someone practice meditation? What would you say to someone who has not started yet?
Well, first of all, I would ask them if they want to.
If they want.
Because, yeah, if you want to practice, why? And then I would ask them, why? You know, what's motivating you even to think about it? Because if you're not hungry, it doesn't matter how delicious the meal is, you're not going to be interested. The reason to meditate is because we're constantly like a rock rolling downhill. We're completely out of control. We don't know where we're going. We don't know why we're going, and we don't know how to stop it. Before I discovered the spiritual path, I described myself as the puck in the ice hockey game of life, that I was always just being pushed this way and pushed that way. And then sometimes they would boo and sometimes they would cheer. You know, it was totally confusing to me. I just couldn't figure, lots was happening. It was very entertaining, but it made no sense. And when I began to understand that the sense I was looking for was available to me if I just detached myself sufficiently from the whirlwind of my own mind. You know, the simple practices of watching the breath, of resting in the heart. It took the way I would feel about it is like a swing, like my mind was always like this. And when you're pushing a swing, you can also slow it down. And what meditation does, it slows it down. And when it slows it down, all of a sudden you have more choices and you feel less out of control. And then, of course, more subtle things begin to happen. You begin to discover what you really think and feel. See, in this world, people are just taught to distract themselves. People are never taught to just be still. I mean, I don't know what it's like where you are in California.
Yes, it's the same exactly. Yes. Now I'm in Greece.
Exactly.
I'm based in Greece, but it's the same exactly. Yes.
Well, where that even everywhere you go now, there's a video screen. I mean, like when I'm putting gas into my car, there's a video screen. When I'm waiting for an airplane in the airport, there's a video screen. And if not, you have one of your own. So your mind never rests in itself. It's always being like this. And so how can you possibly know what you think and feel? Because you're always being distracted from it. So we make all kinds of decisions without having any idea what my actual true feelings are about that, or my true thoughts about it, because we've never taken the time just to find out. Meditation just puts you alone with yourself. which for many people is a terrifying experience because they've been running away, they've been suppressing, and they have to keep going, but it doesn't serve you. And sooner or later, all that catches up with you. And meditation is the way to calm down. Then, even much more deeply, when you become really calm, we discover that who I am is much bigger and much more connected to a higher reality than we knew. And that's very comforting, extremely comforting. And you see, you always have it. There's nothing, absolutely nothing, that can take away your consciousness. So when you become comfortable in your own consciousness, then you're always safe in a real sense. Because then even if the physical body ceases to function or dies, you have your consciousness. The more you have defined and identified yourself by consciousness, the more actual power you have, even power for external accomplishment. Because if you're strong in your consciousness, it doesn't matter what happens, you just persevere. So it's the key to everything. I don't know how people live without meditating. I don't know how they do it, but they apparently do.
Yeah. I have a question on intuition. So intuition is simple. Why we must first calm the heart?
Well, because the mind always supports whatever the heart wants. And mind and heart have to work together. I'm not one of these people who denigrates the mind, but because obviously I don't. But when you are prejudiced in favor of a certain point of view, your mind will support it. I mean, there's the psychological phrase now, denial. People talk about denial. How could you be in such a state of denial? Well, you could be all the evidence in the world. I mean, the classic, let's say your spouse, your partner is an alcoholic. Everybody knows they're an alcoholic, but you don't know they're an alcoholic because you don't want to know that they're an alcoholic. And so you take all the same facts and you just run them through your mind, but because your heart is so prejudiced, you just don't see it. There's qualities of ourself. You know, I really want to be an artist. I don't want to be an engineer, you know, but everybody in my family wants me to be an engineer and I'm supposed to make money as an engineer. So the heart is afraid then to know that I don't want to be an engineer. I want to be an artist. So the mind picks up all the reasons. So only when the heart is at peace with whatever life brings us are we able then to think clearly. Because if the heart is unafraid, then it will allow the mind to neutrally consider all possibilities. If the heart is afraid, it will just distort the mind. This is how, you know, things like terrible political movements and fanatical cruelties and so on can take place, is because people's hearts get all excited and then intelligent people cannot see the obvious realities. So in meditation too, we talk about calming the mind, but it's actually calming the heart. When the heart is at peace, then the mind is also calm. It comes automatically. Likes and dislikes of the heart is how they put it in yoga. If you prefer and don't prefer, you're a slave.
Thank you. Let's go to another quote of yours, another saying. If the world is primarily energy, it seems logical that the shortest path to success should include applying the right kind of energy, and then the universe will reorder itself to help us accomplish our worthwhile goals. Even our successes and failures in the outer world come by magnetism. Would you like to explain this?
You know, I'm no scientist. I don't have a scientific mind, but I'm smart enough to know that Einstein changed our perception of reality more than 100 years ago by telling us that matter is just a pattern of energy. And Now it's accepted, physics and spirituality are coming closer and closer together because the scientific world has recognized that matter is an illusion. It's a pattern of energy. So if matter is physical, that means you have to push. You have to, get a crowbar. You have to put your shoulder to the wheel. You have to push the rock. And so it's a matter of who has the most physical energy. And, that means who has the most money, who has all these different things that can push the world in a certain physical way. If, as they say now, that the world is just energy, the forces of energy are very subtle. And it's all about the moving energy creates a magnetic field, and that magnetic field pulls things into its field of energy. Just think about it. If there's one kid who's really enthusiastic about a certain game, and that kid puts out a whole lot of energy, he can get all the other kids to come play the game with him.
Yes, indeed.
Right. And yeah, even as an adult, if you have a hard, unpleasant job to do, but you're having fun and you get everybody there, and everybody's covered with mud, but nobody's thinking about that. They all want to help you because you're creating a magnetic field of joy that draws everybody into it. So we watch how magnetism affects the world around us, people around us, or it also, if we're paying attention, we're seeing magnetism at play all the time. If somebody is crabby and dark and starts complaining, the whole room can go down into crabby and dark. What is that person doing? They're just creating magnetism that's sucking you into it. And you will also see that whoever has the strongest magnetism and the most magnetism can take over the ones who have less. Whenever it's a question of magnetism, the greater magnetism affects the lesser magnetism. It converts it into itself, actually. So once we start understanding that and really think about how it applies to the whole world, our thoughts and our actions and our feelings are constantly creating a field of energy. And so the field of energy that we are creating is affecting all the energy fields around us. And depending how powerful that energy field is how much of the world around us it can affect, how powerful the change will be. So one of the most important things for success is not just your skill, but what your magnetism is like. If you're positive, if you're enthusiastic, if you have control over your energy, if you're creative, and therefore obstacles are just seen as an opportunity to come up with a new idea. What you're constantly doing is you're creating a positive field of magnetism. The more powerful that field is, the more consistent it is, the more the energy of the universe will start responding to it. I mean, this also goes the other way in terms of tapasya, which is like austerities. We just finished the Olympics, and those Olympic athletes, there's many reasons why they're successful. One of them is they have concentrated their energy. This is what training is. It's not merely that they do the things that they're trying to do, but in order to have enough energy to do that, they don't do a lot of other things. In other words, they sacrifice. They withdraw energy from many arenas. They concentrate that energy in one direction. That's what gives you power. If you just casually say, oh, I'm going to affirm success, and then just keep going out, partying every night, sleeping late every morning, but you keep saying your affirmation for success, all your energy's going in a whole lot of other directions. You have to gather it within yourself and direct it towards your goal. But if you persevere with magnetism and focus your energy, you're much more likely to be successful than by any other method.
You
And
discussed about this mad and having all friends around you and participating in doing activities. I just moved in a new house a month ago, and everyone is coming here to take care of the garden, clean, mop, and we are all with mud on our hands and feet, and everyone is so happy taking care of of nature, being close together, singing.
no, it's
This is the
exactly true.
magnetism, yes.
So I've been in community for 50 years, for my whole adult life. And whenever there's a project, my question always is, who's going to make it fun? And if you have some person that is well known for making things fun, then everybody will come
Exactly,
because they
yeah.
have magnetism for it. Yeah. So and so is leading a work day. So and so is going to work in the garden. So and so is going to fix the broken machinery, and everybody wants to come and help.
Yeah.
This was how Swami Kriyananda, my teacher, created the communities that I live in because he was so magnetic. That was just the secret of who he was. He was also brilliant and funny and lots of other things, but mainly he just had this, because of his own devotion to God, really, and his own joy in that devotion. Just whenever you were close to him, your energy just went where you wanted it to go. It went upward and happy and clarifying and fearless. And it was just because his vibration was so strong. But bear in mind, he wasn't overpowering others. He was just creating a flow. It's like the current of a river. He was creating a flow of like a river. And so you would get into that river flow, and then all of a sudden it was easy to swim. But it was you who was swimming. And more than that, when from being with him, what happened was I discovered how much fun it was to be like that. And it awoke within me the determination to become more and more like that. So it wasn't like it was given to me, but I had the experience, and then that experience made me hungry. And that's exactly how it works. That's how a true teacher works. He makes you hungry.
Yeah, and this playfulness and childlike attitude that we
Yes,
can
very
bring
much.
in every activity, every choice, or every moment in our life.
Yes, if you have it inside yourself. But that also depends on, you have to have a perspective. This is where meditation comes in. You see, it all becomes one story. If you have really touched within your own heart, within the privacy of your own consciousness, at some point in some way, you've experienced that kind of joy, or you've experienced that kind of freedom, power, whatever you want to call it, but it's an awareness of something much greater. And it just changes your relationship to everything else because you know where you're going. When I really became serious on this path, it was like, well, Swami Kriyananda for me, but it was also the teachings he presented. It's a pole star. The ancient mariners could always find their way because there was a fixed point, and they could always measure themselves in relation to that. So what happened to me when I met Swami and really got on the spiritual path, there became a fixed point and I could always tell which way was forward because I could compare myself to the vibration of that fixed point. And then I could do what I was capable of doing, which was not always by any means perfect, but I at least knew which way to turn. Prior to that time, it was like, which way to turn? There's 1,000 people telling me 1,000 things. But when I began to see that there was a fixed point of joy, of truth, of divinity, and ever since then, by no means have I been perfect, but I've never been lost. Prior to that, I was often lost, which is a great difference. You can be far from home, but if you know which way is home, then you're not lost.
Having this North Star that guide us. We're going there.
Exactly. Exactly. And I came to it because of past lives also, but my experience proved it to me. I've had a lot of years to test. And when I face that way and try to move that way, everything works. When I get confused and turn my back and try to move the other way, it doesn't work. So then I have to turn around to go back. You know, you just take a false trail, you realize this is a dead end, you turn around, you walk back, and you start up again. It's no big deal. You just
A
keep,
learning, yes. A
you
learning
just,
in this endless path, yes. Sri Yukteswar said that the purification of the heart is a very long process, and that purifying the heart means to remove from it all the restlessness that makes us think we don't already have within ourselves everything we'll ever need to fulfill us. What do you propose?
well, my advice to everyone is don't give up. Just don't give up. It is a long process. It's not even just long in this life. It's many, many incarnations because, I mean, really think about it. Think how many experiences we have that just, they don't resolve. You know, we make a certain amount of progress, but then the opportunity passes or people die, or we've just reached the end of what we're able to learn in this lifetime. And it just has to go on the shelf. And we have relationships with a certain number of people, but if you think about how many incarnations we've had, how many, I mean, this one lifetime accumulates so many different bits and pieces. And all of those, the vibrations of all of those eventually have to be faced. Now, that doesn't mean you have to face every single person. I think of it like the notes on a piano vibrate at a certain frequency. And so between delusion and enlightenment, there's a certain number of frequencies you have to live through and then understand the divine power on the other side of it, or realize, well, that's beautiful and it makes me happy to a certain extent, but it's not enough. I have to keep going. And so we all have just endless unresolved longings, you know, that just didn't quite work out. So I was talking to Swamiji once about reincarnation. He said what causes us to reincarnate is regret, the desire that we could go back and do it better, and longing. Either longing for something we didn't get or longing to repeat something that we really enjoyed. And so all of those things, just what Sri Yukteswar says, they make the heart restless. Because when we're trying to be contented, we think, oh, but I wish, but I want, but I would have done. I mean, that's what happens to you. Think about it. You're fine, and then your mind starts thinking, you know, just, I mean, the most mundane things. I need a new pair of shoes. Yeah, I need a new pair of shoes. I wonder if I'll get a chance to apologize to so-and-so. Why doesn't so-and-so apologize to me? And that is all these vibrations in the heart that are not finished. So the obvious thing to do, I mean, I just put it to my mind this way. I try to stay current. I try not to let anything accumulate. So I can't clean house completely, but I try not to let things accumulate. If something needs to be done, I try to do it right now. If there's something that I need to make amends for, I try to do it right now. If there's something I want to say that's positive, I try to do it right now. So that at least in the moment, I'm not adding more to it. Now we come back to meditation. You know, over incarnations, the disappointing love affair that you have, there's not two of you in your heart. It's not your longed for lover who's now gone, but it's a vibration in your spine. It's on this, from delusion to enlightenment, there's a vibration that says unfulfilled love affair. Okay, like this. And so either you have to go and fulfill that love affair and then put it to rest and be able to go on, or you have to understand that that vibration itself is not really the vibration I want. And the reason you discover that is you get to a higher vibration and you realize, oh, I see. I mean, think how many times this has happened to you. Oh, I really thought that was what was required, but I see this was what I was really seeking. Now, sometimes you're just moving around on the same level. Well, he didn't want me, but now he does, you know, and but other times you're really, oh, I was really looking for someone to tell me that I was okay. But now I understand that I'm a worthwhile person, so I don't want that vibration anymore. And then also we can calm those vibrations merely by the practice of meditation, especially what Sri Yukteswar taught, that kind of meditation. Kriya Yoga, it's called, but that's a word that you have to say the Kriya Yoga that Sri Yukteswar and Yogananda and Lahiri taught. But what it does is, okay, think of it like this. These vibrations of distraction, the impurities of the heart, if you've ever seen a river running, a running river, you'll also see that some of the water gets trapped in a whirlpool. Maybe some tree fell in, maybe somebody threw an old truck into the river, whatever it might be. Some of the water is going to the sea, but the rest of it has gotten trapped by something and it keeps spinning. So one of the ways you can stop it from spinning is you can pull the truck out of the river and put it back up on the bank, and then the water is freed. So you have the experience, you get rid of it. The other way is if you increase the flow of the river becomes so strong that the distraction, it just gets swept into the river. So by the right kind of meditation, you're increasing the flow, the central flow, and then a whole lot of those impurities of the heart or vrittis, whirlpools, they just get drawn into the river because your sense of joy, satisfaction, self-worth, security, all the things we're seeking become so powerful because of this flow that you no longer think about it anymore. It just goes out of your mind because it's gone out of your heart. So all of that, however, for almost everyone takes time, because it takes time for us to generate. This is the energy universe. See, that whirlpool has a certain power, and we have to generate enough energy to be stronger, to have more energy going this way than is going this way. And usually that takes time. In theory, in principle, it doesn't, but in fact, it does. So
it does.
Yeah,
And
it just
spiritual
does.
growth doesn't happen overnight. It needs time as well. I remember a very interesting video of yours 2 or 3 months ago about the 4 stages of awakening according to the Varna system in Dharma. If you would like to briefly explain for our audience today, and then they can retrieve the whole video on your YouTube profile if they want.
Yes, the Varna system in Dharma is it's the 4 stages of awakening consciousness. In fact, they fall into the category in India what they call the caste system. But the caste system, as it is expressed in India, is a complete corruption of what this really means. One of the many principles of ancient Indian teaching is that we have higher and lower ages on the planet. And so in higher ages, all of society is arranged to help people awaken their consciousness. In lower ages, it's not. So the idea of the 4 stages of awakening consciousness comes from a very high age. And then over time, it became a physical thing, which is, this is my caste. And then if I am a high caste person, I want my children to be high caste. So, and I want the low caste people to stay low caste. So it became fixed and became an instrument of oppression. However, in its truth, it's not. 4 stages are basically and each of them is characterized, well, by multiple things, including what do we think brings us happiness? That's one of the best ways, because happiness and suffering, joy and suffering are the keys to every single thing we do. Everything we do, every decision you make is because you think that decision is going to alleviate suffering and bring you happiness. And if you look at it, no matter how stupid and misguided it appears later, at the time, you thought this was the best way to happiness and the best way to avoid suffering. Even if it's drug addiction, if it's murder, If it's hiding under your bed for a whole incarnation, whatever it is, you think this is going to bring more happiness and alleviate suffering. So that's one of the ways that you measure these. The 4 castes, the 4 stages, the archetype of the first, it's called Shudra, is a peasant. And what that means is someone who just sees the world in physical terms. Oh, the other thing is what motivates them. And that stage, it just sees the world as physical. It doesn't understand principles, no principles, nothing. It's just me. It's what I can experience with my body. The only motivation for a Shudra, for this archetype, is a fear of punishment. And I don't ever want to put out energy, because what I think makes me happy is to put out as little energy as possible. To just sleep all day, to watch television, to drink beer. And all of us have parts of this. If I want to be happy, I'm going to lower my consciousness. I'm going to get drunk. I'm going to sleep. I'm going to watch television. I'm going to have lots and lots of sex, whatever it is, so that I'm just physical and I don't put out energy. The only thing that motivates me is that there's going to be a punishment that's going to be so terrible that it's going to be worse than the necessity of putting out energy. Okay. But if we gradually are punished enough, because we'll starve or whatever it is, or get kicked out of our peasant cottage, we start putting out energy because we have to, and we discover, hey, it's kind of fun to put out energy, because when I put out energy, I get what I want. I get more money and I can buy more beer. So I'm going to put out energy to buy beer, but at least I'm going to put out energy. So then we get to the second stage, which is the Vaishya stage. And the Vaishya archetype is the merchant. And the merchant is perfectly willing to give as long as he gets something back. So the thought is, so I will put out energy as long as there is a return for me. And I'll put out lots of energy if there's lots of return for me. But if there's nothing in it for me, I'm not going to do it. So we're not thinking about principles. We're not thinking about being unselfish, anything like that. And the way we get happy when we're Vaishyas, when we're merchants, is we control the world around us. You know, we make the people around us behave. We get lots of money in the bank. We set up our little home and we put a little fence around it. We put lots of food in the basement and we control the world around us. And then I feel happy. But of course, you can't control the world around you, because there's revolutions and there's earthquakes and there's nuclear wars, and people have a way of doing what they want to do and not what you want them to do. So gradually that begins to not work for us. But if we start putting out energy to get for ourselves, every once in a while, we're accidentally generous. And then we discover, gee, it feels good, not only to take care of myself, but to take care of others. So first we take care of our family. And then by chance, we start taking care of strangers. And we begin to think, wow, I like being generous. I'll put out energy just for the sake of helping others. And then now we come to the Kshatriya level. And the Kshatriya archetype is the soldier. Because the soldier sacrifices everything for the sake of others. Now, of course, these are ideals. You know, the soldier is separated from his loved ones. He endures great physical hardship. He's even willing to die for the sake of others. I'm going to protect my family from the invading horde, whatever it might be. But what the Kshatriya is really doing is principle is more important than self. And with the Vaishya is just, I'm the most important thing. I'll put out energy if there's something in it for me. The Kshatriya realizes that the real happiness comes when I understand an ideal and I live for it. And the happiness comes not from controlling the world, but from controlling myself. And the reason it's a soldier archetype is because I realize the battle is with my own nature. And that selfishness and laziness, which correspond here, if I overcome it, that's where real happiness comes from. And then when we start living a great deal by ideals, we stumble on the Brahmin level. And the Brahmin level, the priest, which is, oh, it's not just my ideas, there's divine law. And when I become in harmony with divine law, that's what the Kshatriya discovers. When I become in harmony with divine law, then I become a Brahmin. And the Brahmin now is like the priest, the one who does all the rituals, but the true Brahmin lives for God alone. And the true Brahmin is always happy, because why would I ever want anything to be different than it is? You know, if everything is God's will, what is happiness, what is suffering? It's all the same. And so the Kshatriyas learn to control himself. And when you learn to control all of that oscillating energy, like Sri Teshar was talking about, then you discover that it was always within me, and it was always right. But now the thing about all these, I mean, they're so fantastic, because in some areas of your life, you're still a Shudra. In other areas of your life, you might be a Brahmin. So it's not like you fit into neat categories, but then you work with it. Like if there's things that you absolutely won't do unless you're punished, then you have to set up really strong punishment so you'll do it, you know. But if you'll do it, if there's something in it for you, then you set up a system of rewards for yourself. Whatever it might be. I'll buy the new dress. I'll take myself out to the movies. Whatever, I'll take myself on a holiday trip to the Greek islands after I get my
Yes, you're
PhD.
invited. Yes.
But whatever it is, until you realize, no, I'm doing it just for principle. I don't need to reward myself. I'm doing it because it's right. And you work, it's a way to work with your coworkers. It's a way to work with your children. And it's definitely a way to work with yourself. Your children can be very different. I remember this child, Swami Kriyananda was taking family portraits, and he came over to this household and he was going to take a family portrait. He had 3 beautiful children. The youngest was a boy. He was about 3. And it was time to take the portrait. He wouldn't come out from under the bed. He just wouldn't come out. He didn't want to have his picture taken. He crawled under the bed. And his mother was trying to persuade him on principle. Swami Kriyananda is here. He's going to take a picture. It'll be good for the family. All these things. Boy would have none of it. Swamiji knelt down and he said, if you come out and let me take your picture, I'm going to give you this candy bar of chocolate that I got in Switzerland. And the boy came running out for the chocolate and had this picture taken. And his mother realized that it wasn't quite Shudra, because even Shudra didn't motivate him. You know, I'm going to punish you. But if there was something in it for him, he would do it. So she started paying him to be good. And she paid him to be good until he began to enjoy being good. And it was just like, that was what worked with him. And it gradually raised him. But if she had never paid him to be good, he would have just been negative the whole time. Because there's nothing in it for me. You want me to be good. I don't care. You see how fun it can be?
If you are interested in these 4 stages of awakening, go on Asha's YouTube and find this video on this Varna system and connected with Dharma. So I have 2 last questions, Asha, for today. The first one is, how can we be an instrument of light?
Well, again, the first thing is to want to be an instrument of light. So the first thing you have to work with is in your own heart, which is, what is the purpose of my life and how can I fulfill it? And then you have to start asking the question, and asking it very honestly and dispassionately. What really brings me happiness, and what really brings me suffering? And you have to behave authentically, as we started at the beginning. You can't just pretend. You have to really experiment and pay attention to the results. Spiritual life is really very scientific in the sense that it's proved by experiment. You know, if you betray your conscience, if you betray high principles, what is the consequence of that? And if you act and realize that you're being compelled by selfish, dark energy, what is the consequence of that? So once we begin to discover that I sleep better at night, I'm happier, I can face people with an open heart, then you begin to want to ask the question. And if you simply want to ask the question, it helps greatly to find a teaching that will give you a clearer perspective about how life works. You know, all of the ancient teachings of India has always specialized in inner realities. Nowadays, there's so many choices, but educate yourself, you know, learn, practice, learn certain practices. But above all, it's a desire. And there is a power of light. There is a divine power of God. There is a loving divine mother who's hovering on the edge, just waiting for you to ask the right question. So if in whatever way you want to do that, if you start building a relationship with higher wisdom, call it your own higher wisdom, call it God, call it divine mother, doesn't really, you know, it doesn't care what you call it. It cares that you are interested in receiving that vibration. And once you become interested, the doors will open themselves and follow through. You know, every opportunity that comes to you, follow through. And it will teach you itself.
Mhm. Let's conclude with this one. How can we live more consciously?
It takes energy.
Mm.
So the way to live more consciously is to live more energetically, because energy and consciousness are closely related. Once again, you have to do it a step at a time, and you have to build on who you are. So I have a very, what sounds like a silly piece of advice, but it isn't, for two parts to it. First is, in every situation, when you're ready to stop or when you feel yourself running out, just do a little bit more. Just a little bit more. The example that I use in my own house is, I'm not very house proud. I mean, I keep a tidy house, but I don't really care. I can easily fall asleep with dirty dishes in the sink. I don't have to finish the kitchen before I go to sleep. I have friends who can never sleep if there's dirty dishes. I sleep fine. However, if I see that I'm about to go to bed or walk away from the downstairs of my house, and I don't really want to clean the kitchen, I'll at least rinse and stack the dishes. I'll do a little more than my first impulse is. So whenever I'm just about to quit and I think I'm out of energy, I always try to do just a little more. And that gets me in the habit of saying, I can do more. And then, of course, that little gets bigger and bigger over time. And the other way of putting it, which is the same thing really, is try to do a little better than your worst. If you're in every situation, you know, if you're about to lose your temper, if you're about to say something that you shouldn't say, if you're going to have a hissy fit over something that's upsetting, just, you know, maybe you were just going to scream with an expletive. Maybe drop out the expletive and just scream. Maybe you know you were going to shout something angry, instead you'll say it quietly. Or, you know, just, I mean, that all sounds sort of silly, but ask yourself, do I really have to go this far? Or can I just pull it back to here? And it's the same as putting out more energy. Do I leave the kitchen just a total wreck? Or do I just get a little better? I'm not making it good, but I'm being better than my worst. And oddly enough, if you actually make that a practice, you will find your whole life begins to change. Just totally. Because you're always a little more. You're always getting bigger. And step by step, what seemed far away now becomes natural, then you take the next. That's how real spiritual development happens. It happens just a little bit at a time. And then you look back and you think, I'm just not the same person. And you don't really know how you got here, because every step was a natural step for you. You know, an apple seed has the potential to become an apple tree, but it has to go through every stage of development. It can't, when it's just a little tiny sapling, say, well, I'm tired of being a sapling. I want to be an apple tree. There's nothing you can do. And we also have to get realistic about ourselves. Yes, we are God realized beings eventually, But in the meantime, I have to go through all the stages to get there and just be at peace with them. There's nothing wrong with us. This is just who we are. A 4-year-old child is 4. They just, it can't be 7 until it is. And then all of a sudden 7 is perfectly natural. So it is with us, just the same.
Maybe we didn't plant apple seeds and apple trees today, but I'm sure we planted seeds of love, of light, of peace, of harmony, of alegria, happiness all over the world. You're invited to come in Greece, and why not even climb on Mountain Olympus, the highest mountain in Greece. Step by step, step by step, we can do it.
Step by step. I would very
Step by
much
step.
enjoy that. I almost had a trip to Greece next year, but it conflicted with another plan. So, but maybe next time. I would love to come. Okay.
You're invited for sure. It was an honor. I'm so grateful, really. Wow, 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 wow. Thank you very much. Grateful. And
I'm
why
so
not
happy.
see you soon in Palo Alto, California, or in Europe, in Greece, maybe in Brazil, maybe somewhere else. We will see.
We will see.
Thank
I'd
you
love
very
to-
much,
I'd love to-
Asha.
Okay. God bless you, dear.
Have a great day.
I would like to thank our generous sponsors for today. Our first sponsor is ANICON. ANICON is a leading sustainable project and construction management company in Greece. Learn more about ANICON at aniconprojects.com. Our second sponsor for today is ForcaDivina Foundation, that aims to raise human awakening and help increase consciousness. Learn more about ForcaDivina at forcadivina.org.